When I came here, I suddenly was in a situation where I'm studying and people are going out all the time. So I started going out and I suddenly ate a lot more meat than I ever had in my life before. And then in 1999, I did a permaculture course. And for the first time, I met vegetarians. I had never met a vegetarian before.
This is the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast, and I'm your host, Maya Acosta. If you're willing to go with me, together we can discover how simple lifestyle choices can help improve our quality of life. Let's get started. Today, we discuss the importance of joining a support group as you make your way to a whole food plant-based life. Karoline Mueller shares her story of transitioning to this lifestyle and becoming the leader of a local support group in Houston, Texas. Karoline works closely with doctors Munish and Bandana Chawla, who will also be featured this week on my show. The Peaceful Planet Foundation's annual retreat will occur on October 8th in Houston, Texas. I am looking forward to connecting with people in Houston. Stick around to learn more. Welcome, Carolina.
Thank you so much, Maya, for having me on and reading this lovely introduction. I'm so honored to be on the Pod Advisory Committee.
And we are honored to have you. I kind of had, I've had some interactions with you. I just really think you're an awesome person. You've been on my podcast before. And so the fact that you have been able to join the Pod Advisory Committee, I think it's so great. And we're going to share your story for our listeners. So it could be that we have people that are actually pod leaders or belong to a pod, or people that are pod curious. So we're going to learn a little bit more about your story. So what is the subcommittee that you're part of for PAC?
I'm part of the growth subcommittee. So we are looking at how we can get the word about the Pod network out into the wide world. And it's a really exciting undertaking because it gave so much to me. I really think that there's definitely anyone who's interested in whole food plant based should have access to it because it's such a main support in my life.
We're talking about different ways that PAC members are working to, like you said, spread the word and also on our end to support pod leaders. But it is very important, like you said, that we help spread the word to whether it be physicians or regular individuals, just helping them to understand that, this is life changing. This way of life is incredible. And then once we adopt this way of living, it's just like we have a new mission, a new purpose for life. For anyone who may not have heard your story, and I am going to include a link to the interview when you came on. I want to say it was actually 2020. So you came on and then you did a little food demo.
That's
So
right. I had just started to do video online food demos.
that's
And I was
right.
so proud showing off how I had a setup.
I thought your setup was pretty cool because you were working two cameras, and that's pretty tricky. I've tried that myself when I've gone live doing food demos, and it's really hard doing it on your own.
It is. And I have tried recordings and nobody helping behind, right? And I wanted to use the good camera, so I didn't use the forward facing, I used the backward facing one, and boy, my head was cut off.
I'm sure that you're in a very different place today. So that was 2020 when we all had to pivot and we were finding ways to support our community online. So that's part of what we're working on for the event subcommittee. I always get that wrong. Okay, Carolina, let's start off by learning a little bit about you. Now, in your bio, I did read that when you were younger, fruits and vegetables were introduced to you. Let's start off by talking a little bit about your own story and how you have battled with food. This topic is so important to me because I do come from a background of having had disordered eating. And while I didn't fluctuate so much with my weight, I became very obsessed with food. So, can we start at that point?
Well, people can probably hear that I'm not American. I grew up in Germany, and I was one of those rare kids who struggled with food. Most kids around me did not. Actually, in my family, I'm the number four of four. And one of my sisters, she had like stomach issues and she didn't, you know, she had to be in, or my parents thought she had to be encouraged to eat. And so with me, they try to encourage me to eat less. So that's, split that parents try to do with different kids. And I really got food obsessed at very, very young age. Like I might have been 4 years old when I remember like checking nobody's there, climbing up on the kitchen counter to get to the rolled oats and the sugar and the milk out of the fridge. I was old enough to open that old fashioned fridge where the door handle was still locking. Yeah, this is really intense memories, even though I was so very young. And I think it's, for me, it's part of, because I had surgery when I was 3 years old and something shifted. And I just wonder if like my gut's microbiome shifted or something happened. I had a lot of antibiotics at the time. So something just didn't support me in just being a healthy kid that, eats when food is around and then stops thinking about it.
So did, your mother's reaction to it all contribute to it as well? So while she's encouraging one child to eat more, she's encouraging the other one to kinda restrict, it sounds like.
Yeah, back then there wasn't much knowledge around that and that much wisdom, and it got really worse when I think it might have been third grade. There was an official, government doctor coming to the school, checking on the health of the children, and boy, did my mom get the lecture about her daughter being overweight. It was so bad. It really it it really made a huge impression on my mother. So we went back to our regular family doctor and she talked about it, was like, let's, put her on a diet or do something. And the doctor said, hold on, just, calm down. Just let it be. She might just go out of it. And I think she would have been right. But now we had to do something. And I went for 4 weeks on Atkins diet. And yes, I lost the weight. And after we stopped, the weight came back and the same again.
Yeah. Oh my
That
goodness.
was fun. So, and that was the beginning to really stoke the flames of food obsession. And then older brothers, they were on quest for health. We had a lot of cold and flu and allergies, and my oldest brother had such a bad, I think it must have been like a staph infection just before the exams for the baccalaureate, the German high school exams, which is a big deal that really determines your grade, that antibiotics didn't work anymore. That was a little scary. um, that same family doctor, she also was an acupuncturist. She had actually gone to China to study. She was a really rare individual, and she helped with acupuncture. And then, the quest continued. Finally, we found someone who was really, in Germany, it was known as the Schnitzer Diet. So he believed in raw food. He took it to not just raw vegetable and fruit, so we ate a lot of the raw vegetable salads, shredded root vegetables, and all kinds of vegetables mixed together, but also to eat raw whole grain. So not eating rolled oats, which are steamed, but get a little mill, something that can shred the grains and shred it and soak it overnight and eat it raw with raw vegetables and back then some yogurt. Um, and whole grain bread. This was in the 80s. There was not that much whole grain bread around. And when my family does something, they do it. So we went out to buy a mill. Electric mills were really, really expensive. And my oldest brother was a physics student. So we bought one of the larger, well, probably like this, hand mills. And I actually had the joy of grinding some of the flour for bread by hand, which took about an hour. And then he got from someone motors and built this humongous over engineered electric mill. And then you would have the flour for your bread in about 5 minutes. And we made bread till somehow the local bakery started making whole grain breads. And back then, these days, when you look on a package and it says on the front whole grain, it's actually most likely that the grain is still treated and they use the starch part and then they add the outside layer and they're all engineered together. No, this was just the grain put into a mill and flour comes out and that's what you bake with. And so that was so important to me that when I came to the States, I came with a mill. Yes. A little tiny one. And then later I bought a bigger one.
That's an important skill to have, though, knowing how to make bread. That's very important, especially when, we have limitations like doing groceries or like what we were facing in 2020.
Actually, lately we haven't made much bread. Um, yeah, all of this, it really, like, through my teenage years, it really helped. It sort of calmed the dragon, and I was in pretty good shape. And then a single stay in France, 3 weeks vacation with a pen pal in France, and they really want to show me French cuisine. And there was like every weekend, like we went out to wine and dine. I mean, a 16-year-old wine was included. It's Europe. Um, it stoked that dragon in me again. And when I came home, I was en route to study, to go to the music conservatory to study piano. And I didn't go to school, so I had lost outside contact. And all I had, this pressure to get good enough to pass the audition and be at home, practice. And all was in my head was hunger and where the chocolate is and where the food is. And I had some joint issues. It was terrible. It's just can't say it any different. And I didn't pass the audition. I didn't become the musician I wanted to be. That then stoked depression on top.
You initially went to France because of your love for music.
It was just a pen pal. Actually, it was just to learn more French. I was getting quite good in French. And it was a great time. I loved being there, lived in a suburb in Paris. We went into Paris. There were an older brother and cousins. It was a great time.
I bet. So now, I feel like a lot of listeners, especially the female listeners, could probably identify with that struggle that you've had most of your life, where, there's the diet that comes in after you've been shamed by somebody in the family. So there's the diet. And then it sounds like you hit a really nice spot at one point when you were doing more mainly raw foods and you were making your own bread, and then the traveling exposing you to food. Many of us love food. I still consider myself a foodie,
Yeah.
but now it's just a different type of food that I eat. So tell us more how what else happened? Because it sounds like right now you may have healed your relationship with food. Is that so?
Not completely, actually. I still struggle because I would like interesting food to be in the house for my husband. I mean, all whole food, plant based, but still more interesting. So there are some dried fruit and some nuts in the house. And the whole COVID time, as much as I managed with keep things going, keep cooking classes going, something shifted. And right now I'm actually have to work on it a bit more again. It's interesting um, that something like this might never completely go away. And all I can do is to support myself with love and kindness around this. And I was talking with a friend about it. It's like maybe it was actually good that I have to deal with it again because it also makes me think about it in different terms again. I now had conversations and I listened to Dr. Yami Casola Lancaster and other people who talk about this. And it gives me, I had a little bit of superiority before it. Here, do this and problem gone, poof. And now I see, no, it might not. be that straightforward a line, even if you surround yourself with wonderful food made from vegetable fruit, whole grain, and legumes.
I want to add to what you're saying in terms of like maybe you're still back at struggling with some of the things that you have in your home. It kind of is a testament, though, to how important it is to have a support group. And so both of us, you and I, had pods before the pandemic, and it's easier when I don't want to say our own group holds us accountable, but in a way they do because we have to be role models. Let me back that up by saying, or rewind a little bit. When I started 2020, I had my labs drawn. Everything looked great, and I was thinking to myself at the time, "Well, of course, I'm a whole food plant based. Of course, everything's fine." As we've gone through this pandemic and have been limited, not only in the restaurants we could go to, but the social events and connecting with people, I slowly started to have a little bit more of the vegan processed foods. And Carolina, I noticed that my cholesterol started going up again. Like I was fine early 2020. Suddenly my cholesterol goes up. And part of me is disappointed in myself. Kind of like what you were saying, it's so hard not to judge ourselves
Mm.
when, we gravitate towards a certain lifestyle. And so I got serious about it again and put my foot down and I said, that's it. I know that I love whole foods. I know that I embrace this way of life. I know that I know how to cook. So let's cut out all the stuff that's affecting my cholesterol. But just to summarize my story on my experience is that I got my numbers down again with the lifestyle, with the whole food, plant based way of living. And I got rid of all the processed foods. And yes, I really believe that part of it is that we find comfort in food. And when we're not able to come together like we used to with potlucks and social events, well, then we just kind of do what we do at home. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are many different things that can throw us just slightly off. And one thing is, as much as the community can hold us, it. I also want to put out that if you're still off kilter, it's to go to the community even more and not say, "Oh, I'm not in good enough shape." I really, this episode here really brings the whole shame piece around it back into my mind, and awareness that if someone comes and still struggles, to really be just accepting they're the person they are. And we want everybody, wherever they are on that journey, to come and be welcomed in the community. And that there is not judgment about, what we're struggling with. There's only support. And the support is what the person wants to that level, right?
Absolutely. I think that, I've been plant based for 6 years. But when I first joined the Facebook groups, I remember my husband also joining groups, and he would say, "Oh, look at this comment of so and so being criticized because they still use oil in their food, or whatever it may be." Or I remember once showing off a potato, and I had removed the skin, and someone else made a very gentle comment, like, "Oh, I love it too, but I even love the skin even more." And so there are ways that you can encourage people with, but yes, having a judgment-free support group, I think is so important. And Carolina, you brought up shame again. That is such an important topic. That especially right now, having gone through an intensive life, all of us have gone through, experienced all sorts of losses. Um, so yes, of course, we're going to gravitate towards comfort foods, but to be shamed for it rather than encouraged doesn't really work when you shame people.
It
Um,
just doesn't.
and being gentle with oneself. So let's move forward. I don't know if we covered how you actually discover the plant based lifestyle.
I had a long journey. So when I came here to the US, so back home, I was really not that much interested in eating meat. Like I always said, like my family said, "Oh, let's, have something for Sunday." I grew up with, we had meat Sunday and Wednesdays or something like that. So I didn't grow up meat heavy, but there was other meat products in the around all the time. It's Germany, so we're talking sausage and cheese and um, all kinds of animal products around every day. So when I came here, I suddenly was in a situation where I'm studying and people are going out all the time. So I started going out, and I suddenly ate a lot more meat than I ever had in my life before. And then in 1999, I did a permaculture course. And for the first time, I met vegetarians. I had never met a vegetarian before. And it took me a little bit, and it took being with the people and going for a bike ride with someone and that person not eating my food because there was meat in it, till I really stopped and thought, that's actually what I always wanted to be. So I was a vegetarian. And then I had really close friends. They were vegan. They were actually at home. They were whole food plant based. They had found the McDougall program and followed that because one of the friends had acid reflux. But when we went out, of course, it was restaurant vegan food. And when they said something about cooking without oil, I was like, how do I saute onions without oil? It's like so stereotypical. um, and I think they weren't the greatest cooks, so they couldn't tell me. So there was eventually becoming a vegan. Now my weight got lower and then it came back because I found all the vegan ice creams or all the rich foods. I have like the four noses or five noses for the rich food. So I really struggled. By then I was getting much more into the spirit of being vegan, not just plant based. So I didn't want to let go of it, even if people, made all kinds of suggestions how I could help myself with food by getting off the vegan diet. And then one day, my supervisor, who's I'm really friends with in reality, he had triple bypass surgery. And that made me check out the McDougall webpage again. I had checked a few years ago and I hadn't understood it and I hadn't gotten it. But I think they also changed the webpage in between and something in my mind changed and I suddenly understood. And I got it and I gobbled up everything I could get my hands on. The McDougalls back then, they put on twice a year an advanced study weekend where it was a 2.5 day event with different speakers. So I got to expose to all these different speakers and I was buying books and reading and annoying my friends and losing that glue that food is for community, right? That didn't work anymore. So but I was very lucky. Someone new came into my life who became briefly my boyfriend and now is my husband. He fully supported me in this and he made the change himself. He noticed how wonderful he feels. We got married. Then, when I started to talk about becoming a Food for Life instructor, he said, yes, go for it. So in 2015, I trained to be a Food for Life instructor and have been teaching classes since then. And then in 2016, PlantPure Nation came out. 2016, I found it. It came out in 2015. And I missed the showing here in Houston for some reason. It was someone else who started Bayou City Beet as the first pod in Houston and came up with this name, Leah Stoller, thank you. And in May of 2016, I joined the pod and I was teaching a cooking class. And at that, the Kickstart Your Health series at the end is a potluck, but I only had two people in class. So I invited the whole pod to join us because I knew that would get variety and my two students would actually see the full beauty of eating this way. And then shortly after, Leah said, okay, you're a great pod leader. There you are. That's how I became pod leader. And then more pods joined, and we started to do events together. And now we really start growing together. The pod leaders that are active in the Houston area. We are looking forward to starting a jumpstart for a group, and really thinking about ways to bring it out to other communities who haven't had the benefit yet of knowing about this. And we work together with Peaceful Planet Foundation, which is an organization by Doctors Munish and Vanina Chawla here in Houston. So there is a lot of synergy going on, a lot of supporting each other, which I really love. And so, for example, the potlucks I do, they're at the lifestyle clinic of Doctors Munish and Vanina Chawla.
As a matter of fact, I want to add that that was one of the things that intrigued me about Houston when I learned that all of you pod leaders come together and support one another. And now you're under the umbrella of PlantPure Houston. So you're a bigger force. And I don't know what year it was, if it was 2019 or the year before, but I found myself driving to Houston. This is before I had a dog, because now I could never do this. But I found myself driving to Houston three, four, I don't know how many times. And it was to either attend like the Rice University Veg Fest that was put together. That might have been the one where I saw different representations of pod leaders. And then at the time, I did know doctors Munish and Bandana Chawla, and so just seeing that collaboration, the coming together under like the Peaceful Planet Foundation, but just in general, was really intriguing for me. And I remember I would drive and do a visit. Like there was also at the Minute Maid Park, there was a Veg Fest there too.
Mhm.
And so I remember coming back and telling my husband, like, I want that in Dallas. Like, I want to create that sense of community. We were already pod leaders, but we don't really have that connection with it. Like, it just seems, especially because of the pandemic, that a lot of pod leaders have lost interest or just have been limited because of our
Yeah.
our current circumstances. So you now go under PlantPure Houston. Tell us now about how you're collaborating or you're doing a lot more in-person events now with doctors at the actual clinic, the Lifestyle Docs clinic. Tell us more about that and what has it been like for you resuming that activity, the events?
Yeah, we had just started that in the end of 2019, and we started to have monthly potlucks there when COVID hit. And I decided right away that we would keep it going with most of the time, like once a month, an online meeting. And I think for some people that was important, for other people that didn't fill the gap. Um, then we had end of last year, we had I think one or two meetings. Then Omicron came, we shut it down again. But now we had two meetings, and people are coming back, and it's really joyful to see people come together. They bring the food. It's sharing food. It's many conversations. Just different people coming together. I invited one of my students from work. He is a mechanical engineering student who changed his diet to whole food plant based because I talked to him about it, and he was talking to someone else. Actually, he was talking to Shara Aguirre, who wrote the book. Delicious, joyful being. I'm blanking so badly right now. People come together, and then it was sort of a surprise. The Shera had invited the founder of Urban Harvest Houston, which is an organization to promote food production in urban gardens in the Houston area. So Dr. Bob Randall and his wife Nancy Edwards came, and she was a Peace Corps volunteer in her younger days. And seeing her talk with my student who's from Rwanda, it's just wonderful to see these coming together.
Now that you mentioned Urban Harvest, and I'm thinking about other doctors that support this plant-based way of living in the Houston area that we still don't have in Dallas. But for example, I want our listeners to know that Dr. Garth Davis, was in Houston at one time,
He is
and
back
now
in Houston.
no, really, what?
Yes, back in Houston.
Oh my god, and, are you guys gonna work together or have him speak at
I'm
events?
thinking of I was thinking of what we can offer him, right? It's that whole thing. What can we offer him? So I will see to reach out to him. In the past, he has been very easygoing. When there were documentary screenings, he would come, be on panels and talk, just talk to people.
Dr. Davis is a bariatric surgeon, is that right?
That is correct. But he wrote the book Proteinaholic, which is for anyone worried about protein, it's an important book. Um, and he's quite active on Instagram.
Mhm.
You can follow him and see, he talks about it all the time. He just recently had a post talking about how his patients are so worried about carbohydrates and starches. I mean, the thought is so scary to eat those.
His book, Proteinaholic, was one of the first books that I read, probably right after reading Dr. Esselstyn's book. So I'm a big fan of Dr. Garth Davis. And then you also have in the Houston area Dr. Baxter Montgomery, who also has a practice.
He has a practice and he has a kitchen. I think it's called Garden Kitchen. It's a wonderful place where people can pick up food. He has a lot of fresh raw food, which is really important for people to, jump something, may they be may they struggle with heart disease or with diabetes. So it's a great resource. Now he is so busy and speaking. I mean, he is a national international speaker.
Well, Houston in general, the plant-based movement in Houston is incredible, and it's been a real inspiration for me to see everything that all of you are doing. I remember at that Minute Maid Veg Fest, there was also a panel discussion, and so you had that's when I learned about Dr. Roxanne George, who's a pediatrician, and I probably Dr. Munish also might have given or been part of
Yeah, he
the
was.
he
Hmm.
was.
Yeah,
And now I've seen you when you guys had an event for tangerines, something, I don't remember the name
Tangerine
of it.
Hills, we named it.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that
that
was
I
in
have a
2019, spring of 2019.
yes, I have a sister who lives just north of Houston, and so I managed to convince her to join us, and I wanna say that that's where I saw you for the first time perhaps doing one
Mhm.
of your Food for Life demos, is that right?
I think so.
I think you did that, and then I went for my first time that I went, because I think 2020, the Peaceful Planets, Foundation's annual retreat was canceled, I think
It
2020.
was fall of 2019 when you came for the Peaceful Planet Foundation retreat in October, and I did another cooking demo. Yeah.
Yeah, and I managed to bring some people from Dallas, and at the time, my sister came again. Oh my goodness, I'm saying this because I want our audience, our listeners to hear what all of these events do for people, but I was able to bring my sister, and she was impressed. It was a whole day event, which I think hopefully you guys will resume again. And I saw you doing a food demo there and, just calm and you're witty and you have a good sense of humor, which makes it a lot of fun to watch you do some of your presentations.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
so Peaceful Planet Foundation does another event on May 21st. We really start to be active in the third ward in Houston, which is a historically African American neighborhood. And they do like a half day retreat. And so it starts in the garden in the morning, and then some mindfulness and presentation about food. And it ends with a cooking demo by Lucy from Lucy Ethiopian Restaurant, and then lunch. It's going to be very, very good. And I'm going to miss it because I'm in Germany.
That's right. I remember you saying on social media or in your newsletter that you would be traveling. So, by the way, what an awesome idea that you're outreaching to a community that could really use this information.
Yeah, we just want to offer it, and whoever wants to come to us and work with us and help become ambassadors for it in their community, make it their own. That's really what we want. We want to offer resources, be supportive, and give people the space to run with it and shape it to where they need it.
Absolutely. And the reason that I'm mentioning all of these events is that as a pod leader who collaborates with other experts in the field, you are really helping to create all sorts of ways that you can outreach to people. Some people might be moved and convinced by tasting foods because of the potluck. Some people may need that documentary. Some people may need a veg fest to attend, to then sample things, to hear lectures, to hear panel discussions. And so you're part of all of that, of all that is happening in the Houston area. So you guys,
Me and many other people.
sure.
So it really helps to have a community of organizers where everybody chips in.
Absolutely, and collaborating is one thing that really stands out for me. So as we're having, some of our pod leaders listening to this conversation, what words of encouragement would you give them right now as we're sort of coming out of the pandemic and some of us are interested in resuming our events? What would you tell us? How would you encourage us?
We talked about what's going on in Houston, and we could talk about New York and New York City area and be even more amazed, right? These are metropolitan areas where if if you get me on a bad day, I would say, oh my God, the situation here is so bad. It's like, there are 5 million, or I don't know how many million people in Houston. And if we look, I have 150 people on my mailing list. It's like a drop in the bucket. So I want people to not be discouraged when they live somewhere and say, there's nobody around me. And I would invite people to start small, to start a pot. Yeah, look around if there's something in your area. If there's not, start a pot and just invite your friends for dinner and put it out there. If someone can find you, that's great. Then they can join. So you're not going to sit there with one person and commiserate or sit alone.
You're right. You can start in your own home. That's,
Yes,
it's starting.
we have done that. Yes, and there's still pods here planted in Fort Bend. They still dominantly do these home dinners or potlucks, small groups. Get one person, get two people to come. It's a start. It's a community. You're not alone anymore. And if you really can't find someone, then join something online so you're not feeling alone. Join a specific group so you get to interact with people and it's going to be more personal than just sitting on YouTube and listening, where it feels great, but then in reality, you're still alone.
Right. Also, just like any other support group, there's this wonderful thing about coming together with people that agree with your way of eating. If it's about ethics, it's wonderful to come together with people who care about the animals or also care about the planet, and you have that in common. So it's not just that you're coming together to eat together, but you're building
Mm.
friendships. You're
Yeah.
building this sense of healthy relationships, whatever that means to you. But it's most of us are the only ones that are plant based in our own families. So, like myself, my mother is coming on board, but I have a lot of family members that are not interested. So, this is why we need to create kind of like another family of people that support us.
And also, like, I invite people to potlucks who are not 100% plant based. We call it plant forward or plant curious. And it's getting people through the door and tasting the food. And also, once you get a larger community and you have more bandwidth to invite people who are not like totally supportive for you and vice versa, right? You invite people who are really just, like I said, maybe plant curious. They might say, oh my God, I didn't realize that not just you could cook good food, but there's so many people who can cook delicious food or prepare delicious food this way, just to show that it doesn't take extraordinary skill to make good food.
Hmm. Very true. And I like the idea that you said that you don't have to be fully on board, just interested, I guess, because the whole goal is just to teach you how to bring more plants into your life. Because, most of the foods that the average person eats, I mean, most of the food is processed, so it's void of nutrients. So when you eat more plants, more salads, more fruits, more vegetables, you're eating foods that can help improve your health. So no shame in you not being fully plant based. I mean, after all, we don't always want to preach to the choir, right, Carolina?
Right.
We want to outreach to new
Absolutely.
people. So you've said you've given us tips on whether we're interested in becoming a pod leader. Also, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to learn about you, or something I could have asked you and forgot?
I want to finally get the correct title for Cheryl's book out. It's Delicious, Joyful Vegan.
Ah, yes, I have heard of that book.
It just bothered me that I
That's right.
couldn't remember.
So now you said you only have 150 people on your newsletter, but I actually thought you would have more because you put a lot of effort into the newsletter. So if any of our listeners are interested in signing up for your newsletter, do you have a link for that?
Put it in the show notes because I don't remember off the top of my head.
So I'll put your link in the
And
show notes, but I wanted our listeners to know that your newsletter, like I said, you put a lot of effort into it and you include everything that's happening in your area, but you also have, you guys have, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've interviewed other people online, kind of like Zoom interviews.
during the COVID times, I started to invite guests to make our monthly meetings more interesting.
Yeah,
And I would like to keep something like this up in addition to the potlucks because it's a different dimension.
right. Exactly.
And getting people the option to have an interaction with the speaker. So we invited different people. The last one we had on was Dr. Yami Lancaster Casola. And it's just nice to have that personal interaction. And also, I can dig around, in the wider Houston area, get people on who might not be able to travel. So I will think about it, and it's also then something I can offer people who are not in the Houston area, who are looking for, a home to have some
Yes,
connection.
absolutely. Also, I'm subscribed to a lot of newsletters from people all over the world, specifically here in the States as well. Because you never know who knows who in what state. And so, like, for example, I subscribe to a lot of things in Phoenix, even though I live here, because I always want to continue to offer resources to my family members who are mainly in the Arizona area. So if I know that there's something going on in that area, I let them know, which is why I think it's important to sign up for newsletters if you're interested in this way of living. And then you also include recipes from time to time. You recommend documentaries and books to read. So you offer a lot of resources.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad that someone looks at them. You never know with a
You
newsletter.
never know. That is true. So Carolina, I know that you'll be going to Germany. So congratulations on that. Is this your first time since the pandemic that you've been able to?
No, I went last fall. It was really time for me to see my dad.
Yeah.
It's going to be his 95th birthday
Yes.
in May. So yeah, every day is now becoming precious, and I'm excited that I get to go so soon
I
again.
know. Well, I think it's wonderful, and you mentioned that in your newsletter that how important this is for you to spend time with your family and
Yeah, there's probably no reminder email because it's going to be a very turbulent, fully packed vacation this time.
that's right. As far as your pod, do you have anything going on that you can share with us for the rest of the year? Anything happening in 2022?
Besides, together with the other pod leaders, thinking about immersions and how we can work this. We haven't planned anything as far as I know, but maybe my mind is just going blank.
No, I mean, I think most of us are still holding off a little bit. It's like, "Can we come out? Is it safe?" You know? Um,
Well, we definitely have potlucks. There will be a potluck till hopefully we don't have to call it off again every month from now on. I personally hold the hope that in the Houston area we will have two potlucks, one on Sunday, one on Saturdays in slightly different areas. And so my grand vision is for these pod networks to have pods in so many places, to have pods in all kinds of communities, churches and schools and gyms and wherever you have people come together to have these micro support groups or hopefully medium-sized support groups all over and then network them. Houston is so huge, it's so much time to travel, right? I go to an event at Susan and Kent Marsh and Jenna and Louis Dana's pod. It takes me half an hour, 40 minutes to get there.
right, I know. I know that area, believe me. You have to plan your whole
And
life around that traffic.
I'm willing to do it because it's so important to me. But for someone who's just curious or has limitations in some ways, it's a huge barrier. So we need to have more geographic distribution. I
Yes.
really think so.
We really need to get more leaders, yes, on board. So, Carolina, you were a leader before the pandemic, and you really try to offer support during the pandemic. You pivoted like many people. Now, as you said, you're hoping to resume things. You're slightly doing more food demos. This whole experience of being a pod leader.
The whole food plant-based cheerleader.
That's right.
Yes.
Has it despite the limitations, has being a pod leader for PlantPure communities, has it continued to be gratifying for you?
Oh, absolutely. I could not do it otherwise if it wasn't so gratifying.
Yeah, it's really given us a
It's,
sense of purpose. So, what is the best way for people to reach you if they want to either? We will put a link for the newsletter, but if they want to learn more about you, do you have a website? What's your social media?
I don't have a website yet. I'm on Instagram as Carlina's Plant Kitchen, and I have sort of mostly stepped away from Facebook. I do have that addictive nature in me, so all these social media are really tricky. You're welcome to join the newsletter and keep up that way. And if you have questions, if you want to have a conversation, you can always reach me by email or telephone. Happy as much as I have time to have conversations with people.
Yes, and I really do think your newsletter is the best way to connect because I feel that like you're speaking to us directly, like you're keeping us informed, which is what people use social media for. So, Carolina, it's been such a pleasure, my friend. I hold you here very dear to my heart. I really admire you and I respect so much of what you do. You've been a role model. And like I said, my sister has been to these events because I attend them. And so you and the entire group in Houston that is involved with this whole food plant-based lifestyle are doing wonderful things. And thank you so much. I want everyone to know that it's happening in the Houston area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Carlina became involved with the Plant Pure Community's pod network after watching the film Plant Pure Nation. Pods are support groups open to anyone interested in adopting a whole food plant based lifestyle. As a matter of fact, here's a short summary of what the pod network is. People from all walks of life and at different stages of their wellness and plant based journey have an open invitation to become a participant in the pod network at any time. To date, there are close to 500 groups across the globe with tens of thousands of people involved in the pod network. Participation is free and offers support and networking opportunities to anyone interested in learning, incorporating, advocating, and practicing a whole food plant based lifestyle. Karoline Mueller is the pod leader of the Bayou City Beets, one of several pods in the broader Houston area. Carlina's battle with food began at an early age. Her mother would often discourage her from overeating. At times, her mother was concerned about Carolina's weight. These comments can lead someone to develop an unhealthy obsession with food. Carolina's awareness of her relationship with food has helped her to understand how she can support others in their journeys. In 2015, she trained as a Food for Life instructor with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to deliver nutrition and cooking classes. Later on, she took over the Bayou City Beets support group. We both agree that being part of a support group is beneficial. Group members can hold each other accountable and motivate one another to stay on track. Often, group members learn about healthy recipes, grocery tips, food preparation, meal planning, and the overall health benefits of eating a predominantly whole food plant based diet. Self compassion is important. We talked about taking it one day at a time. Remember that it is a process and there is no right way to do it. We want to encourage you to love yourself even if you have not reached your goals. If you are ready to change your life, either find a support group or create your own. You can also reach out to local organizations and see if they would be interested in starting a plant based meetup group. You may be surprised to learn about other people who are just as interested in adopting a plant based lifestyle. Karoline Mueller's story is inspiring and a reminder that anyone can achieve the same healthy results with whole foods and plant based living. Mueller's years of struggle with food show that the process is not always easy, but that improving your relationship with food is possible. These tips can help you get started on your journey to better health. Make sure to subscribe to Carolina's newsletter. The following guest interview I have is with Doctors Munish and Bandana Chawla. Carolina works closely with these physicians. They are the founders of the Lifestyle Docs Clinic in Houston, Texas. They also founded the Peaceful Planet Foundation, and their annual retreat will take place on October 8th. I'll make sure to add the link in the show notes. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation, my friends, and thank you again for being listeners. You've been listening to the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast with your host, Maya Acosta. If you've enjoyed this podcast, do us a favor and share with one friend who can benefit from this episode. Feel free to leave an honest review as well at ratethispodcast.com/HLS. This helps us to spread our message. And as always, thank you for being a listener.